Hello everyone, this is Jim Lucy, Editor-in-Chief for Electrical Wholesaling and Electrical Marketing, with episode number 123 of today's The Electrical Economy podcast, sponsored by Champion Fiberglass. Champion began producing epoxy fiberglass conduit fittings in 1908, and in 1909 developed the first conduit from epoxy resins that had flame resistance and low smoke characteristics. This met the most stringent codes and specifications. In today's podcast series, we're going to dive into some interesting findings from Electrical Wholesaling's 225 Top 100 listing. We'll also be checking out some weekly economic indicators that can give you a sense of where the U.S. economy and the electrical market may be headed. These 5 weekly economic indicators are initial unemployment claims at the state level, rail freight car traffic, the Baker Hughes rig count, oil prices, and copper prices. Our thanks again to Champion Fiberglass for sponsoring today's Electrical Economy podcast series in 2025 and for more than 100 episodes over the past 5 years. For the week ending June the 7th, the advanced figure for seasonally adjusted initial unemployment claims was 248,000. That is unchanged from the previous week's revised level. The 4-week moving average was 240,250. That is an increase of 5,000 from the previous week's revised average, and this is the highest level for this average since August 26, 2023, when it was 245,000. This number may bear watching over the next couple of weeks. The May unemployment rate was 4.2%, and that is the same as it was in April and in March. We only had one state that showed a decrease in unemployment claims of more than 1,000. That is a number I kind of look at as a significant change. And we were showing that Kentucky's claims were down 4,245, now standing at 1,625. Other states with reasonably significant declines were North Dakota, down 935 claims, Tennessee, down 666 claims, Mississippi, down 403 claims, and Kansas, down 203 claims. Here's where the unemployment data gets a little dicey. We had 10 states that had increases in unemployment of more than 1,000 for the week ending June the 7th. California was up 9,433 claims. Minnesota was up 4,682 claims. Pennsylvania was up 3,860 claims. Texas up 3,344 claims. Florida up 2,851 claims. Massachusetts up 1,898 claims. Iowa up 1,773 claims. Illinois up 1,736 claims. New York up 1,325 claims. And Oregon up 1,101 claims. Interesting leading economic indicator for the overall economy is freight rail traffic. It's a measure of the amount of raw materials and finished goods being shipped by rail. The best source for this data? The American Association of Railroads, or AAR, which publishes this data weekly at www.aar.org. We did have a slight dip in the overall traffic when you look at it on a year-over-year basis. For the week ending June the 7th, total U.S. weekly rail traffic was 483,807 carloads and intermodal. That is down 1.3% compared with this time last year. It is also below the weekly average year-over-year of 493,469. I look at traffic as being high when it hits top 500,000, and we're a bit under that right now. When you look at it over for the first 23 weeks of 2025, total carloads and intermodal units are up 4.5% compared to this time last year, so things are looking pretty good. I continue to see some positive future economic indicators. Take a look at the traffic figures for individual freight categories. The positive momentum carries through from the total figures for these individual freight categories, with total intermodal units up the most at 6.1% since this time last year, and that is well over the total freight figure year-over-year of plus 4.5%. Coal is up the most at 7.1%, although this increase is up over some comparatively low historical figures. The only figure showing a reasonably sizable decline at all, metallic ores and minerals, down 3.2%. Now let's take a look at oil drilling activity in the largest basins in the U.S., and we get that number on a weekly basis from the Baker Hughes rig count. This slide gives you an idea of the largest oil and gas deposits. It gives you a good sense of just how many of these large oil plays are in Texas and Oklahoma, and how big an area the Marcellus gas region covers in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and parts of West Virginia. The Baker Hughes rig count saw a comparatively sizable drop of 9 oil and gas rigs in the most recent data, and it's down to 559 rigs in total, with 6 of those rigs lost in the Texas Permian Basin and the Eagle Ford Basin. Gas rigs were up 5 rigs, and in total, the Baker Hughes rig count is down 35 rigs from last year for a 5.9% drop. Gas rigs are actually up year over year at plus 16, but there are 50 fewer oil rigs in operation right now, year over year. We saw a 7% oil price spike on Friday, June the 13th over fears of repercussions from the Israeli-Iran conflict and the potential impact on oil shipments in the Middle East and specifically the Gulf of Hormuz. On Monday, June the 16th, oil prices for WTI were $71.98. Despite this increase, WTI oil prices are really not that much over the 2025 year-to-date average of $67.54 when you look at the average through Monday, June 16th. Economists like to call copper pricing Dr. Copper because it's the leading indicator of future economic activity since it's used in so many industries. The construction industry is among the leading markets for copper because of its use in wire and cable, copper plumbing pipe. Currently sitting at $4.82 per pound on the COMEX exchange, copper pricing appears to be unaffected by the Israeli-Iran conflict. COMEX copper pricing is still running well within its annual range and is comfortably over its year-to-date average of $4.64 per pound. Copper hit a high of over $5 per pound from this year, from mid-March through early April. Its low was during the first week of January when it was just over $4.03 per pound. From top to bottom, that's a 30% swing in pricing, which definitely fortifies the observation that copper is a very volatile indicator. I'm still learning some things as I look at the numbers from the 2025 Top 100. Let's take a look at some fresh data that came out in this year's Top 100 ranking. You can get all the details on it on Electrical Wholesaling's website at www.ebwweb.com. The top 10 electrical distributors continue to gain market share. This year, according to our estimates, the top 10 distributors total in 2024 did $79.8 billion in sales. We believe that is 52% of 2024 total estimated sales through distributors of $148 billion approximately. At the top of the list again, Wesco with $19.2 billion in sales. These are North American figures, and I keep it at the North American level so we can compare it right with Sonepar number 2, which also reports on a North American basis. Gray bar sales also had a nice increase this year, $11.6 billion. Rexel also up in the top number 4, just over $8.8 billion. We don't get an exact figure for consolidated electrical distributors, but we do have an estimate based on the number of employees that they do report. Wesco over 708 branches, and that is a North American figure. Border States came in with $4.5 billion in sales. And we'll talk a little bit later. They also had some large acquisition with the Dominion Electric Supply. They were also very actively increasing their RDC network. City Electric Supply sitting at number 7. Also, as usual, opening lots and lots of branches in North America. They now have 750 branches. Dr. McKay, very big, obviously, in the automation market, came in very strong this year. At number 8, U.S. Electrical Services, also a very large company. We don't get exact figures, and we did get an estimate from their employee website, but it is large enough to rank in there, and it'll get a little bit bigger next year with the acquisition through its Monarch Electric Supply subsidiary of Teterboro's Swift Electrical Supply. That's Teterboro, New Jersey. It's a nice-sized acquisition for them in the metropolitan New York market. And coming in at number 10, Elliott Electric Supply, crossing over $2 billion in sales. 183 branches now. I think it was 14 branches they opened up last year, if I remember off the top of my head. I came up with 5 fun facts from this year's Top 100. We talked about one of the first the fun facts, the top 10 distributors accounting for $79.8 billion. That's 52% of the electrical wholesaling's total sales. When you think of that, 10 companies accounting for more than half of all sales. It just goes to show you the consolidation is getting stronger and stronger. When you look at our total listing, and these are estimates, and we got a great response to the top 100 this year, but there were some cases when we had to do some sales per employee estimates, or had to bump up if a company replied last year with a sales figure, didn't reply this year, we bumped up their figure for an estimate, did not publish that estimate, but just for placement only, and bumped it up so we could kind of get them in there for placement. But for the top 100, 73% of all the sales to electrical distributors, as far as we can tell, and that is through full line distributors and product specialists. One of the companies growing fastest by any measure, Lone Star Electrical Supply, top $1 billion in sales. They've been in business for just 9 years. So Jeff Metzl and his team there at Lone Star, some really terrific growth. They're expanding. They are opening up in Nashville. They've expanded to Oklahoma. So definitely a company to watch. I mentioned earlier, as far as we can tell, the Elliott Electric Supply opened up at least 14 new branches in the last 18 months. I don't have an exact figure for how many City Electric Supply opened up, but I will say that between Elliott and City, they probably were the two distributors open up the most new branches. And here's, I guess, a trivia question. If they wanted to know which company, as a full-line electrical distributor in the United States, and this is not North American figures because that would be City Electric Supply, but in the U.S. branches, as far as we can figure, CED has more than 700 locations in its branch network. Very impressive figure right there. And while we saw the revenue figures increases in 2024 were kind of all over the lot. We saw a bunch of companies with some very large revenue increases. We also saw those companies, while there weren't drops in sales, they were pretty minimal increases. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4%. But the companies that did have some increases, and there were 4 that really stood out on the list, and I'm going to give them to you right now. Eckerd Supply, Corydon, Indiana, up 54% over the past in 1 year. Access Electric Supply, Renton, Washington, up 35%. Jackson Electric Supply in Jacksonville, up 34%. And we mentioned Lone Star Electric Supply, but up 30%. And these companies were clearly the leaders when it came to revenue increases from 2023 to 2024. One of the reasons that I love working on this ranking over the past 20 years is what I learn about the electrical market each time from the responses that we get from distributors. And one of the reasons we get such a popular resource in the industry is kind of the insight that we get, and some of the surprises and interesting facts that we get from the electrical market. And one of the big things I learned this year was about a market that we don't hear about maybe as much as some of the other fast-growing markets, but how much electrical potential it will offer. For example, and that market is Jacksonville, Florida. Larry Swink with Jackson Electric Supply, based in Jacksonville, he offered some great insight into how much Jacksonville is growing and the size of several mega projects that are going to be offering opportunities for his company and other electrical professionals in that area. One of the big projects, and that's a $1.4 billion renovation of the NFL Jackson Jaguars Everbank Stadium. It'll include a translucent roof, expanded concourses, and upgraded amenities. In that area by the stadium, the project will also include, this is the Shad Khan's development team at Guana Investments. They'll have a 4-season hotel and residences, condominiums, and a 6-story headquarters for the Jaguars adjacent to the stadium. I think that sounds, I don't know too much about the headquarter sizes, but that for NFL teams, but that sounds pretty darn big. There are a couple of big projects too with the U.S. Navy's Kings Base Naval Submarine Base. And in 2 different projects that were Larry mentioned, $600 million in renovations there. The Kings Bay Naval Submarine Base is interesting to me personally because one of my sons worked there on some supply vessels that were supplying the subs there. And I also have my cousin's son also worked on the submarines out of there. So whenever I see something about Kings Bay, I'm always quite interested in that. Also in the Jacksonville market, 2 wastewater reclamation projects topping $100 million. In total construction value, and at the Baptist Medical Center in Jacksonville area, $190 million expansion, and several large interstate construction projects. And one of the reasons that when I throw out these numbers on total construction projects, the way that I look at it personally, and this is very rule of thumb, different projects will have different percent of electrical potential content, but I've always heard that 10% of a total construction value will be in electrical. So, you look at some of these numbers here, we've got a couple of $1 billion worth of projects in Jacksonville. Take 10% of that, not too bad, some good potential in there. So appreciate Larry Swink giving us so much information on Jacksonville. And again, Jacksonville, a nice, big metropolitan area. Hadn't really been hearing as much about all the different potential up there, but it just kind of gives you a sense of what you can learn by looking through our top 100 coverage each year. That concludes the market data portion of our presentation for today, and a special thanks to the folks from Champion Fiberglass for sponsoring today's Electrical Economy podcast series in 2025 and for more than 100 episodes over the past 5 years. And as always, if there's any data that are covered in the presentation today that you need some additional information on, give me a call at 913-461-7679 or contact me by an email at jlucy@endeavorb2b.com. Threw an extra photo in here today. Just got back from the College World Series up in Omaha, Nebraska with two of my three sons. It was actually our 14th trip up there to catch some good college baseball there. So if you're a baseball fan out there and it's on your bucket list, I totally urge you to do it. You will not be disappointed. It's going to be a couple of weeks before our next presentation. We've got the July 4th weekend coming up pretty soon, so next time we'll be talking with as far as I can figure, Monday, July the 14th. Until then, be happy, be healthy, and have a good day. Take care.